The morning air is cold in Heiligenstadt. A thin mist rests over the fields. Leaves move softly beside a narrow country road. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rings. Birds call from the trees. Farm workers speak quietly as they pass. Inside a small room, one man hears almost none of it. He sits near a window. Papers cover the wooden table. His clothes are untidy. His dark hair rises in every direction. A candle has burned low beside him. He takes up his pen. For a long time, he does not write. His name is Ludwig van Beethoven. He is only 31 years old. Vienna already knows him as a brilliant pianist and a daring composer. Noble families invite him into their homes. Young musicians study his work. Audiences wait eagerly for his next performance. Yet here, away from the city, he feels completely alone. A sound has followed him for years, a high ringing. It never leaves. Voices have become weak and unclear. Music seems farther away each month. He is losing his hearing. Now he begins a letter to his brothers. He writes about shame. He writes about loneliness. He admits that he has considered ending his life. Then his pen slows. Something holds him back. There is still music inside him. Music that no one has heard. What kind of man can stand at the edge of despair, return to his desk, and create some of the most joyful sounds in human history? In this story, you will discover how a difficult childhood shaped Beethoven's fierce character, why a secret letter became the turning point of his life, and how a man surrounded by silence gave millions of people a song of hope. There is also one quiet truth hidden inside his journey. We will return to it near the end. So make yourself comfortable and let the story begin. It was a cold and busy morning in Bonn in the year 1770. The city stands beside the Rhine River. Boats move slowly over the water. Traders fill the streets. Horses pull carts across the stone roads. Above the town rises the palace of the elector, the local ruler. Music is everywhere. It sounds in churches. It fills court celebrations. It follows soldiers through the streets. On the 17th day of December, a baby named Ludwig van Beethoven is baptized in the church of Saint Remigius. His exact birthday is not recorded, but his family probably welcomed him one day earlier. He enters a musical family. His grandfather, also named Ludwig, had been an important court musician. People respected him. He had risen from a young singer to become Kapellmeister, the leader of the court's music. Kapellmeister is a German word. It means the master of the chapel, the person in charge of all the music. The younger Ludwig never truly knows him. His grandfather dies when the boy is 3. Still, a portrait of the older man remains in the family home. It shows a proud face, fine clothing, and serious eyes. For the young boy, that portrait becomes an image of strength. It shows the kind of man a Beethoven might become. His father, Johann, also works as a court musician. He sings and teaches music. But he does not have his father's discipline. Johann drinks heavily. Money disappears. His moods change quickly. Then news of a remarkable child reaches Bonn. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart has traveled through Europe. He has performed for royal families. Audiences have watched in wonder as a small boy played music with the skill of an adult. Johann sees an opportunity. Perhaps his son can become another Mozart. He begins teaching Ludwig at the piano. Soon, lessons become harsh. The boy practices for long hours. Neighbors later remember hearing him cry. Some stories say his father pulled him from bed at night and made him play for visitors. Not every dramatic story from Beethoven's childhood can be proved, but one truth is clear. Music entered his life through pressure, fear, and his father's ambition. Ludwig is small for his age. He often looks untidy. His teachers find him quiet and serious. Mathematics is difficult for him. Spelling is not easy either. But music is different. At the keyboard, he discovers a world with rules he can feel. One note leads to another. A simple melody can carry sadness. A change in rhythm can turn fear into movement. His father wants a successful child. Ludwig wants something deeper. He wants to understand what music can say. In March of 1778, Johann presents his son in a public concert. He tells people Ludwig is 6, though the boy is already 7. Mozart had appeared in public at a very young age, and Johann wants the comparison to seem stronger. The concert does not make Ludwig famous. There is no great European tour. No royal family carries him from palace to palace. Instead, the boy returns to Bonn. He studies. He plays the organ. He performs the viola in the court orchestra. Music becomes work, but it also becomes a place his father cannot fully control. But the story does not remain gentle for long. It was a quiet afternoon in Bonn when someone entered Ludwig's life, who saw more than a useful child. His name is Christian Gottlob Neefe. Neefe becomes Beethoven's teacher. He introduces him to the music of Johann Sebastian Bach. Bach's work is ordered, complex, and deeply alive. Several musical lines move together, each with its own direction, yet all forming one whole. This kind of music demands patience. It also offers freedom. Neefe recognizes the boy's unusual mind. He does not simply teach Ludwig how to play correctly. He encourages him to think like a composer. A composer is a person who creates original music, not someone who only follows what others have written. Someone who builds a new world of sound from inside their own mind. At 11, Beethoven begins working as Neefe's assistant at the court. At 12, some of his first keyboard pieces appear in print. Neefe writes that this young boy may become another Mozart if he receives proper support. For the first time, someone is not trying to force a future upon Ludwig. Someone is helping him discover one. But loss is never far away. Ludwig's mother, Maria Magdalena, is kind and calm. In a home often disturbed by alcohol and anger, she gives her children warmth. Beethoven loves her deeply. In 1787, the 16-year-old musician travels to Vienna. Later stories claim that he met Mozart there, but historians cannot confirm it. We do know that the visit ends quickly. His mother becomes seriously ill. Ludwig rushes back to Bonn. Soon after his return, she dies. The loss breaks something inside him. He describes her as a good and loving mother. Without her, the family home becomes colder. Johann drinks more. His work suffers. Ludwig's younger brothers still need food, guidance, and protection. The teenager begins carrying the weight of an adult. He teaches piano. He plays in the court orchestra. He helps manage the family's money. At one point, part of his father's salary is paid directly to Ludwig because Johann can no longer be trusted with it. The son has become the parent. This responsibility hardens him. Beethoven learns that survival depends on action. He cannot wait for someone else to repair the family. He must work. He must decide. He must continue. Yet Bonn also gives him friendship. The Brüning family welcomes him into their home. Their house is filled with books, conversation, and educated people. Here, Beethoven experiences a different kind of family life. These relationships matter. They show Beethoven that strength does not always need to be loud. Guidance can be kind. A home can be safe. Friendship can remain when applause disappears. Now, here is where the story becomes interesting. It was the autumn of 1792 when Beethoven arrived in the greatest musical city in Europe. Vienna in the 1790s is a city of music and power. Carriages pass grand buildings. Noble families hold private concerts. Opera houses compete for attention. Haydn is respected across Europe. Mozart has died only 1 year earlier, leaving an empty space in the city's musical life. Beethoven begins lessons with Joseph Haydn. The relationship is useful, but not simple. Haydn is famous, experienced, and often busy. Beethoven is proud and impatient. He wants to learn, but he does not want to become a copy of anyone. He studies with other teachers as well, quietly filling the gaps in his knowledge. His greatest early weapon is not composition, it is improvisation. Improvisation means creating music in the moment, without following a prepared piece. It is like speaking without a written speech. You feel the room, and you respond. Beethoven sits at the piano before wealthy guests. Someone gives him a short melody. He pauses, then his hands begin to move. The melody changes. It travels into darker places. It grows, fights, disappears, and returns. A few simple notes become a complete emotional world. People stop speaking. Some listeners cry. Vienna has heard excellent pianists before. But Beethoven does not simply entertain a room. He takes control of it. His playing can be rough. He sometimes attacks the keys with such force that piano strings break. At other times, he becomes so quiet that the audience must lean forward. Thunder, then a whisper, anger, then tenderness. Soon, noble supporters give him money and places to perform. Prince Karl Lichnowsky becomes an important patron. A patron is a person who supports an artist with money and opportunities. Without this support, many artists of Beethoven's time could not have worked freely. This support gives Beethoven something rare: independence. Most composers still depend on a court or church position. Beethoven wants another life. He wants patrons to support his art, but he does not want them to own him. His pride often causes conflict. One evening, Prince Lichnowsky reportedly asks him to perform for French officers. Beethoven refuses. The disagreement becomes fierce. Beethoven leaves in anger. He later writes words that express his view clearly. Many princes exist because of birth, he says, but there is only one Beethoven. He believes talent has its own dignity. By the late 1790s, his name is growing. He writes piano trios, sonatas, chamber music, and his first symphony. The music still carries the influence of Mozart and Haydn. But another voice is pushing through. If stories like this help you learn English, you may subscribe to Timeless Stories. New journeys arrive every week. And this is the moment everything changed. It was somewhere in the late 1790s when Beethoven noticed a small problem. A ringing sound begins in his ears. At first, he may believe it will pass, but it remains. High sounds become harder to hear. He struggles to understand voices in busy rooms. This is not only a medical problem. It strikes at the center of his identity. Beethoven is a pianist. He performs before audiences. He teaches. He listens to orchestras. His work depends on hearing small differences in sound. He visits doctors. They suggest rest, cold baths, warm baths, oils, medicines, and time in the countryside. None of these treatments stop the loss. Beethoven hides the truth. At a gathering, someone speaks softly. He cannot understand, so he watches the person's face and guesses. When friends laugh, he may laugh too, though he has missed the joke. He avoids telling people. He fears they will no longer trust him as a musician. He fears pity. He fears losing his career. Most of all, he fears the future. In 1801, he writes privately to trusted friends. He admits that his hearing has grown weaker for several years. He explains that he avoids people because he cannot easily say those three words. I am deaf. The words feel unbearable. A painter can still paint in silence. A writer can still place words on paper. But how can a composer live without sound? But the story did not end there. It was a quiet October, in 1802, when Beethoven returned to the village of Heiligenstadt. A doctor advises him to spend time there. The village is peaceful. Paths cross vineyards. Trees cover the hills. Shepherds move animals through the fields. People call to one another from a distance. Beethoven walks alone. From far away, he sees a shepherd playing a pipe. The man beside him can probably hear the melody. Beethoven cannot. That small moment cuts deeply. Nature is full of sound, but he feels separated from it by an invisible wall. His hope begins to collapse. In October, he sits down to write the letter we saw at the beginning. It is addressed to his brothers, Karl and Johann. Today, people call it the Heiligenstadt Testament. A testament is a serious statement of a person's deepest thoughts and final wishes. Beethoven explains that others see him as angry, stubborn, or unfriendly. They do not know the hidden reason for his behavior. He wants to join people. He wants conversation. But he is terrified that someone will discover how little he can hear. He admits that despair has brought him close to death. Then comes the decision that changes his life. Art stops him. He feels that he cannot leave the world before creating everything inside him. Notice what happens here. His hearing does not return. No doctor arrives with a cure. No miracle breaks the silence. The problem remains exactly where it was. The change happens inside Beethoven. He stops asking whether life will become easy again. He asks what he can still give. The letter is never sent. Beethoven folds it away. His brothers do not read it during his lifetime. People discover it among his papers only after his death. He returns to Vienna carrying the same illness. But he is not the same man. But what would happen next? It was the early 1800s when Beethoven's music entered a new period. It becomes larger, braver, more personal. He begins his Third Symphony. At first, Beethoven admires Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon appears to represent some ideals of the French Revolution. The French Revolution was a time of great change in France, when ordinary people demanded freedom, equality, and justice. Napoleon seems like a man who has risen through ability instead of royal birth. Beethoven plans to connect the symphony with him. Then, Napoleon declares himself emperor. To Beethoven, this looks like a betrayal. A betrayal is when someone breaks a promise or acts against the values they claimed to hold. A man who claimed to fight old power has taken power for himself. Beethoven angrily removes Napoleon's name from the work. The symphony becomes known as Eroica, meaning heroic. It is unlike anything many listeners have heard. It is long, difficult, full of conflict. It contains a funeral march, but it does not remain in grief. The music struggles forward. This is not the polished hero of a statue. This hero suffers. This hero falls. This hero rises again. Beethoven may be writing about an idea of courage. But somewhere inside the music, we can also hear his own decision in Heiligenstadt. He continues. He writes the Fifth Symphony. It opens with 4 notes. Short, 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 long. The pattern is simple, but it feels urgent. It returns in different forms, moving through darkness until the final part reaches a bright and powerful victory. He also creates the Sixth Symphony, known as the Pastoral. The Pastoral Symphony is a piece that describes nature. A stream flows, birds call, villagers dance, a storm arrives, then calm returns. The composer, who struggled to hear birds and shepherds in the countryside, builds an entire landscape from memory and imagination. He writes the opera Fidelio, a story about loyalty, freedom, and a woman who risks everything to save her imprisoned husband. Again and again, the same ideas appear: darkness and light, prison and freedom, suffering and human courage. And this is the moment everything changed for the world of music. It was the early 1820s when Beethoven turned to an old dream. For many years, he has admired a poem by Friedrich Schiller called Ode to Joy. The poem imagines human beings joined together in brotherhood. Brotherhood means a feeling of friendship and equality between all people. Beethoven decides to place voices inside a symphony. This is a bold choice. A symphony traditionally uses instruments. Beethoven adds solo singers and a full choir to the final movement of his Ninth Symphony. A choir is a large group of people who sing together. He is now living in deep silence, but he writes for a larger world of sound than ever before. He fills page after page with musical sketches. He changes ideas. He tests rhythms. He searches for the right melody. At last, a simple tune appears. It does not begin like a royal march. It enters quietly. The lower strings present it with plain dignity. Other instruments join. The melody grows. Human voices finally rise above the orchestra. Joy is no longer private. It becomes something shared. On the 7th of May, 1824, Vienna gathers for the first performance of the Ninth Symphony at the Theater am Kärntner Tor. The hall is crowded. People have not seen Beethoven on a major stage for years. Many know about his deafness. They have come to witness the return of a legend. Beethoven stands near the orchestra. The conductor has quietly told the musicians to follow his direction, not Beethoven's movements. Beethoven remains deeply involved, turning pages and marking time, but he cannot reliably guide what he cannot hear. The music begins. The first movement seems to rise from empty space. Quiet sounds gather into a storm. The second movement drives forward with fierce rhythm. The third becomes slow and peaceful. Then the final movement breaks open. The orchestra remembers earlier themes and rejects them. The cellos and basses seem almost to speak without words. At last, the human voice enters. The choir sings of joy. Beethoven stands within a world he has built, but cannot fully hear. The final note arrives. The audience erupts. Hands clap. Feet strike the floor. People rise. Some wave hats and handkerchiefs. The hall becomes a sea of movement. Beethoven is still facing the musicians. He does not respond. The contralto soloist steps toward him. she gently turns him around. Now he sees the audience. He sees hundreds of hands moving. He sees faces filled with wonder. He sees the applause that cannot reach his ears. For one suspended moment, silence and music stand together. The frightened boy from Bonn is there. The young pianist who amazed Vienna is there. The lonely man walking through Heiligenstadt is there. The composer who once wondered whether life was still worth living is there. All of them stand inside the same body. He bows. On the 26th of March, 1827, Beethoven dies in Vienna. He is 56 years old. Thousands join his funeral procession. Vienna stops to watch. The melody from Ode to Joy becomes known across the entire world. It later serves as the anthem of Europe, carrying an ideal of unity between nations. Beethoven does not live to see any of this. He never hears a recording. He never knows that people 2 centuries later will study the pages he left behind. But perhaps every artist works in this kind of uncertainty. You create, you offer something. Then you release it into a future you cannot control. Perhaps this is the hidden truth of Beethoven's journey. His greatest victory was not defeating deafness. He never defeated it. His hearing did not return. His loneliness did not disappear. His victory was different. He learned that a limit can close one path without closing every path. And that is exactly what you are doing right now. Learning English can sometimes feel like standing outside a room where music is playing. You catch one word, then you lose the next. People speak too quickly. A sentence disappears before you can understand it. Beethoven's lesson is not that struggle makes everything beautiful. His lesson is that progress does not always require perfect conditions. He built great music note by note, even when the finished sound existed only within him. You are building a new language in the same way. Every story you understand adds another note. Every mistake teaches your mind where to move next. One day, you may look back and realize the wall was never permanent. It was only a place where you learned to listen more deeply, and beyond it, a simple melody has already begun. Tell me in the comments, which part of Beethoven's life stayed with you the most? Was it the frightened boy at the piano, the silent letter never sent, or the deaf composer turning to face a hall on its feet? If calm stories like this help your English grow, please subscribe to Timeless Stories. Thank you for listening, and until our next story, keep following the music that is growing inside you.